Hello, this is Mrs. Spencer, your biology teacher, and this review session video is session 5, and it is going to mainly cover the human body. We are going to go over some of the major human body systems, and at the very end I did add a short little section reviewing some of the major parts of a plant. So that is what we will cover in this particular review session, and I do thank you for watching and joining us today. Alright, so we're going to start with the nervous system, and the main things I want to review with the nervous system is some of the parts of the brain. These are some of the major concepts that might be tested on the EOC, are the parts of the brain. So I want to go over these major areas. So you can see that I have color-coded the diagram here so that you can kind of easily tell what is what. The cerebrum is the large hemispheres, and that is colored in pink. The cerebellum is the smaller brain that's kind of at the back of your head, and that is colored in green. The brain stem is colored in yellow, and that's what connects the brain to your spinal cord. And then you have the diencephalon, which is the kind of middle part of the brain, the inner part of the brain, and that's colored in blue. And then I also have in a darker pink color, right at the base of the diencephalon, is this little punching bag looking structure, and I did color that one only because I wanted to make sure you did know that that's the pituitary gland, which is a very, very important gland in the human brain. That gland is kind of known as the master gland because it is going to control many of the other glands, hormone glands in our body. So it plays a big part in the hormones and secretion of hormones and the control of other glands within our body. Alright, so let's talk a little bit more about the cerebrum. Again, this is the major big hemispheres. We have two hemispheres, two halves of the brain, and these big large parts are called the cerebrum. They're connected by the corpus callosum, which is just a band of white tissue, nervous tissue, this band right here that's kind of striped. That is called the corpus callosum, and that is going to connect the two cerebrum hemispheres together. And the cerebrum is where our main intelligence, language, personality, senses, and motor control is going to reside in that entire area of the cerebrum. The cerebellum, this green area in the back of your head, is going to be mainly in charge of coordination and balance. So that's why if you've ever gotten hit in the back of the head, you might have been a little dizzy and unstable, and that's because the cerebellum plays a huge part in that coordination and balance of the body. The brainstem is the part that connects to our spinal cord, and there are three major parts. There's the pons, which is the smaller portion that kind of goes up into the brain a little bit. Then there's the midbrain, and then there is the medulla oblongata, which is the longer part, and that actually connects to the spinal cord. Okay, and basically the main thing we need to remember with the brainstem is that it's going to control the entire thing, plays major roles in our autonomic nervous system as far as controlling some of our vital structures and vital performances, such as heart rate, breathing, and then of course our reflexes. So things that we don't necessarily have to kind of think about, things that happen automatically, are going to be controlled here in the brainstem. And then finally we have the diencephalon, which is the middle of the brain. The diencephalon is going to encompass the thalamus and hypothalamus, okay? So both of those parts. And the diencephalon is going to be mainly involved in emotions and memories, relay station. It's going to be a relay station. It helps with hunger and thirst and your rhythmic activities, night, day, that type of thing. So emotions, all of that is in the diencephalon. All right, so now let's talk about the reproductive system. The reproductive system is used in order to reproduce organisms of that particular species. So in humans, we use sexual reproduction to do that, which means that you have to combine the genetic information from two different parent organisms in order to get a genetically different offspring. So all human offspring are not identical to their parents. Females are going to produce eggs, which are the female sex cell, and males produce sperm. And each of those have half of the genetic information necessary for the offspring. So let's talk about some of the major parts of a female. The female's ovaries are going to be where the eggs are produced, and there are two of them. So the ovaries are like these little large beans on either side. The fallopian tubes are going to be those structures, the tubes that come off of the ovary. Okay, there's one on each side of these. They're sometimes also called the oviducts, and that is because these tubes are going to deliver the egg to the uterus. And these tubes are also where fertilization will occur. So when the egg gets fertilized, it has to happen during the traveling through the fallopian tube. Okay. The uterus, which is this large flexible structure here in the middle, is going to be where the baby will develop if the egg is fertilized. Otherwise, nothing happens there. But it is a flexible, expandable organ so that it can get much larger when the baby is getting bigger. And then the vagina is the canal that basically is where the baby is born through, and so it's the opening to allow for the birth of the baby. The male reproductive system is going to encompass the testes, which is two of those. This is a side view, so this is only showing one side, but there are two testes, and notice they look very similar to the ovary. The difference is that the testes is stored in a sac outside of the human body, and that is to keep the temperature down. Sperm will die and not develop correctly if the temperature is too hot. So that is why the testes are stored outside of the human body in the scrotum, the sac. But there are two of them. The testes produce the sperm, just like the ovaries produce the eggs in the female. Then there's this little piece that kind of looks like a comma that goes right above each testes, and that's called the epididymis, and that is where the sperm mature. Okay, it stores the sperm and helps them mature to get prepared for release. Then we have the vas deferens, which is the tube that comes off of the testes, and this is kind of like the fallopian tube in the fact that it's going to be the delivering tube of the sperm. Okay, now obviously fertilization will not happen here because the fertilization has to happen inside the female. But this is the tube that does deliver the sperm to the outside of the body. It's going to go by the bladder, and there are some different glands along the way that are going to help secrete some additional fluids to help with the lubrication and delivery of the sperm, and also to provide nutrients for the sperm so that they can survive this journey. And then the vas deferens becomes the urethra. The urethra is the final length of the tube that is going to go through the penis and exit, and that is where the sperm are going to come out. The urethra also connects to the bladder. Okay, so the vas deferens comes to the urethra to deliver sperm, and the bladder also connects to the urethra. So in males, the sperm and urine come out the same area, the same way, the same tube, but they do not mix. Okay, there are mechanisms in place to make sure that the urine and the sperm stay separate, and only one can be released at a time. Now, in females, the vagina is separate from the urethra, where the urine comes out. So there is a separate opening for the urine and a separate opening for the birthing of a baby, and then, of course, another opening for the rectum for your solid waste. Males just have the urethra for the sperm and the urine, And then they also, of course, have their rectum, which is back here, which is the release of the solid waste. Okay? All right, fertilization is when the egg and the sperm come together. That is called fertilization, so that the actual genetic material from the egg and the sperm are going to combine. So as soon as an egg and a sperm combine, that is called fertilization. And again, that's going to take place in the female's fallopian tube. A few things about fetal development, the development of a baby. Just a couple major things that are happening in each of the trimesters. Full development takes about 9 to 10 months, okay, and so that's why they're broken up into trimesters, about 3 months per trimester. Tri means 3. So within that first trimester, a lot of major things are happening. This is when the heartbeat will start. This is also when the nervous system's developing. The limbs are going to start to bud out, and you're going to actually start to see fingers and toes. The eyes, ears, and nose all become noticeable, all within that first 3 months of development. So this is a very, very important time in the development of the baby. And unfortunately, a lot of women do not know they're pregnant right off if they are not planning the pregnancy, and this can be a problem if they are doing things that might put the baby in harm. So it is best to have planned pregnancies if at all possible. That way the woman is aware that there is a possibility of a baby developing and can make sure that things are not being done that might cause problems with these developments of the nervous system and things like that. In the second trimester, this is going to be where the organs are going to start to function within the baby, and the gender is going to be able to be developed or be determined. The first 7 weeks of human development, boys and girls are developed exactly the same. Okay, so basically all humans start to develop exactly the same for the first 7 weeks. It's after the 7th week that the Y chromosome for males will kick in and start the development of the male characteristics if it's a male. If it's a female, it'll just continue on like it was before. So that is why it's the second trimester when we can actually determine the gender, because that gives time for that male chromosome to have started the development of the male sex structures, so that we can see that. The fetus is also going to develop this fine hair all over its body, and is going to get a oily, kind of greasy butter type substance called the vernix caseosa. That's going to be covering the baby, and that's to protect it in the fluid that is going to develop, or is going to be surrounding the fetus while it develops in the uterus. Okay, so that's just a protective measure for the skin. And the baby will start to move during the second trimester, so that's when the woman will start to feel little flutters and kicks and things like that. The third trimester is basically when the baby fattens up. This is the biggest and fastest amount of growth of the baby is during the third trimester. Baby's going to get much bigger and put on a lot of weight during this time. The eyes will start to open. If you were to look at the baby through like an ultrasound or something like that, you could see that the eyes are open. They will start to move less, only because they're running out of room because they're getting so big. They will move to a head down position so that they can get ready for birthing. And the lungs are going to get to a point where they will be able to function properly once the baby is born. So those are some of the major things that are happening in each of the trimesters. Now let's talk about the circulatory system, primarily blood and the immune system. So I want to go over some of the major parts of blood. There are 4 major parts to our blood. There's the plasma, which is the liquid portion of the blood. The plasma is the majority of the blood. It's 55% of your blood is this plasma. Notice it has usually, and this is true, it usually has a yellowish tint to it, and that is from the nutrients that are found in plasma, primarily the lipids or fats that are in the plasma. There's a lot of water in plasma as well, and so when we get dehydrated, where we have low water levels, that can cause a problem, obviously, with our cells and the movement of our blood through the body. Leukocytes, also known as white blood cells, are going to be in this small little buffy area, so very small amount of the blood is this white blood cells, and that's okay. We don't want a lot of white blood cells unless we're sick. When we're sick, our blood cell count will increase, and that can be a problem. But they help with our immune system in fighting infections. Then we've got platelets. Platelets are going to also be found in this little area where the white blood cells are, and platelets help with clotting. So again, we don't tend to have a ton of platelets unless we are needing them because of an injury. And then finally, the second biggest part of the blood are the erythrocytes, or the red blood cells, and those are going to be transferring our oxygen and carbon dioxide, so they're very important. So we definitely want a lot of those as well. Things that can affect the blood flow and how the blood flows through the body: temperature. Higher temperatures will cause the blood to flow much faster, and also will make the blood come to our surface areas much more in order to try to keep our core body temperature normal. So we will get high temperatures, towards our skin and stuff like that. When we're cold, our fingers and toes might get colder because less blood flow will go to those in order to try to keep the inner organs at a warmer temperature. So when we're hot, we have lots of blood flow to all of our extremities. When we're cold, less to our extremities and more to our inner core. Stress can cause affect our blood flow. If we are higher stress, we're going to increase our blood pressure, and that can in turn cause some problems and stress on our heart. Genetics will affect your blood flow. Disease can affect the blood flow. Some diseases can actually cause you to bleed much more easily and cause the blood to flow more easily and not clot properly, such as hemophilia. Others, like sickle cell anemia, can cause the blood flow to be less and to restrict the blood flow. Sickle cell anemia actually has misshapen cells, so they kind of get stuck in the vessels sometimes, and that can actually cause problems in the blood flow. Obesity can affect the blood flow, and clots, of course, can affect blood flow. Fighting illness. So our leukocytes, or the white blood cells, are going to be a major contributor to our immune system in helping us in fighting infections and fighting illness. There are 2 main responses to an illness. We have the specific response, which is a direct and targeted response to whatever is affecting us. So this is going to target a specific pathogen. There is a delay in this response because the immune system and the cells have to identify the pathogen, what is affecting us, and then attack it accordingly. So there are specific cells that attack specific pathogens. Okay. Also, vaccines and antibiotics will be specific responses. When we are given antibiotics, those are geared towards fighting off specific illnesses. Vaccines also are going to be geared towards fighting off specific illnesses. So anything that has a actual direct enemy, so to speak, that it's going to fight is considered a specific response. We also have non-specific responses to illnesses. These are general responses, things like inflammation, redness, swelling, increased temperature. All of those things will happen in the response of pretty much all illnesses and infection, and that's why they're called non-specific, because they're going to happen no matter what, and they are an immediate reaction to an illness or an injury. Okay. Some differences between two main types of pathogens that can affect us. Bacteria are living, so we can actually kill them. They are actual cells that can be killed, and we use things like antibiotics to do that. Okay, they target the bacteria and will actually cause the bacteria to die, and that's the most effective way of fighting and getting rid of a bacterial illness. So that's things like strep throat. Let's see, sometimes some types of pneumonia, staph infections, if you get like an infection in your skin, MRSA, that's a big one that's talked about a lot. It's like the superbug that you can sometimes get, and it's actually much harder to fight, but it is a bacteria that can be used. We can use antibiotics to fight it. Those are some examples of bacterial infections, okay? Viruses, on the other hand, are not considered a living thing. They are basically just genetic information and a capsule, a protein, membrane. So they don't actually do anything unless they're inside another cell. They have to be inside one of your own cells to be able to do anything. So that's why they're not considered living. So we can't really kill them. We can just treat the symptoms and try to prevent getting infected by them. So a lot of our vaccines are for viruses to try to teach our immune system what the virus will look like, so that if we ever come in contact with it, we will get rid of it faster. We also can treat the symptoms by taking medications to help with things like sneezing and fevers and that kind of stuff, but we really don't have any other things that we can do to actually get rid of them. So that's why when you have the flu or a cold, things like that, they don't give you an antibiotic. Instead, you are basically, given some directions on how to help treat your symptoms. And we do have an antiviral medication for the flu that can work if taken right away. And it basically helps your cells identify the flu virus to get rid of it faster. But other than that, viruses are kind of something that just have to run their course. There's not a whole lot we can do once we're infected with them. The good thing about that, though, with viruses is that a lot of times our body, once we've fought the virus, our immune system will remember it and be able to fight it off faster the next time. So a lot of times we do not get as serious symptoms from the same virus twice. Just there are lots of versions of these viruses, so that's why you may still get a cold every year. So ways that we can help keep ourselves healthy is getting vaccines. This helps our immune system recognize viruses quickly and fight them off faster, so that we can actually, survive and not get so sick from them. Wash your hands on a regular basis, and really we should try not to use antibacterial products as much as we do. We've become a nation very obsessed with antibacterial soaps, antibacterial hand sanitizer, and that's actually can be bad in a way, because what happens is not all bacteria will be killed by these things, and so the ones that survive end up being resistant to the antibacterial stuff, and so we actually might be helping them to be able to be persistent and be able to not be affected by all of our antibiotics and antibacterial stuff. So, just washing your hands with soap and water is all it's needed. It does not necessarily have to be antibacterial. Cover your cough. And this doesn't necessarily mean with your hands because you touch everything. So, you know, use your elbow, use your shoulder. Those are some ways to cover up. Finish your antibiotics. If you are given an antibiotic for a bacterial infection, you need to make sure you finish it and take it properly. This, again, helps keep our bacteria from developing resistance, because if you don't finish it, then you're going to leave some bacteria that weren't killed off, and they will have developed a resistance to that medication you were taking. So definitely make sure that you finish all antibiotics when they have been prescribed to you, as they were prescribed. You know, take what the doctor said to take. And again, I put on your wash hands. That's the biggest thing. Keeping your hands washed. Trying not to, you know, touch your face all the time with your hands. You know, cleaning off your cell phones. You'd be amazed how many germs are on your cell phones and things like that, just because we don't think about cleaning those. So just, you know, sanitation and keeping things clean is the best way to prevent illness. All right, so although plants are not human, and this is mainly about human body systems, I did want to throw in a little review on the major structures of plants, just because this is a part of the EOC. So just going over, this is just a main flowering plant here. Obviously, there are all different kinds of plants. Not all of them flower, not all of them have all these parts either. But just to go over some of these major parts that are on flowering plants, I wanted to just give you this picture. So we've got the flower, and that's where the reproductive structures are going to be found for, you know, this type of plant, for a flowering plant. This is how they reproduce, is using the flower with the pollen and the ovules, which is in the style, that kind of thing. So where the seeds are made. Some plants, and including flowering plants, have fruit, and fruit is just a protective covering around the seed, which is involved in the reproduction. The leaves are a major part, and that's where photosynthesis takes place. That's where the plants make their food, so that's the primary function of the leaf. The roots help absorb water. They also anchor the plant and provides basically, you know, a stable structure for the plant. Okay, and get minerals from the soil. And then the stem. The stem is going to be the main transport system of the plant, as far as it carries the water and the food throughout all parts of the plant. Okay? So just kind of going over some of the major tissues. A tissue is any group of cells that form a functional unit, a specific function. There are three main tissue systems in plants. Okay, there's the ground tissue, which is going to be the tissue that helps with basically providing structure for the plant and where photosynthesis will take place. So there's going to be a lot of ground tissue in the leaves. Okay. And then also a lot of ground tissue in the stem because of the structure. Vascular tissue is going to be the tissue that actually is involved in the movement of the water and the food. So you're going to see a good amount of this in the stem. And the two main vessels, so to speak, kind of like how in humans we have veins and arteries that deliver our blood. The vascular tissue in plants is xylem and phloem. And the xylem is what delivers the water primarily, and the phloem is what delivers the food primarily. Okay? And then the dermal tissue, dermal kind of refers to skin, so this is the outer tissue of the plant, and that's called dermal tissue. So on this next slide, I just have a couple pictures to show you. You can see in the leaf, there's a lot of ground tissue. The ground tissue is that brownish color. So the leaf has a lot of ground tissue. In the very center of the leaf is some of that vascular tissue. And if you remember, if you ever looked at a leaf, there is kind of like that main stem type piece that goes through the middle of a leaf. On the stem, again, there's a lot of ground tissue for that support. Whereas in the leaf, the ground tissue does mostly photosynthesis. But the vascular tissue, which is that green, which you can see in the leaf in the center, and then it forms like these little seeds along the side, that green part. That is going to be where what helps with transport of the food in the water. And then in the roots, you can see there's a huge amount of vascular tissue. Okay, there is, of course, the ground tissue also. So the outermost part here, the darker reddish orange color, is the dermal or the outer exterior. The brown is the ground tissue, the support system, and in the leaf photosynthesis system. And then these greener areas, which tend to be more towards the center of a leaf, the center of a root, and then kind of like seeds around the stem, are the vascular tissue. And that's going to be involved in the movement of the water and the nutrients. That's the xylem and the phlegm in that green. All right. So that is the last thing I was going to cover on this particular session. So I want to thank you all for taking the time to view this and listen, and wish you best of luck on the EOC on Tuesday. There will be one more session video, and that's going to cover classification and evolution. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining me.